So we have some very good speakers today. And the very first one, Karl Benne. And so Karl has studied psychology in Berlin, and then was senior technologist at Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital in Massachusetts. And he's since retired, but he's very busy still in academia besides big history. He's co-editing some philosophy and gathering papers of sociologist Schumpeter, who is with the creative destruction kind of phrase. And so he's been very busy and has been kind of in big, associated with big history for quite a while. Karl, you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I know talking about this matter is kind of tough because it's not pleasant. But here we are in the 21st century, and we have to face to what's going on with the real world and not running away from it. So I'm writing on this paper about these challenges we have. We're facing, and this title, stories about human challenges to comprehend and survive man-made and nature-made natural disasters during these three cycles of Kondratieff. I was born into the fourth, just 1949. I guess this was the end of the fourth in 1951, and then 1952 is the fifth that ended 2007. And we are now into the cycle. In 2063 ends the sixth Kondratieff cycle, and this title that we need to transition into the Anthropocene is important in a way because we know this has to happen rather sooner than later. And I thought adding on making big history is important because, sure, if we can really do this, that would be an amazing accomplishment if humankind would basically agree upon we have to live together on this planet sustainably. And it is basically, it's almost like under this cloud of natural disaster, it's kind of tough. But when I added on this via large-scale paradigmatic techno-scientific extinction rebellions, I would like to say the first Extinction Rebellion contract that is successful was 1987. Montreal Treaty was signed, and to close the ozone hole, and it is successful. So far, we're doing it. And the next two thing I want to say, I was surprised learning that Congress has charged NASA in 1999 to go after all the asteroids more than a kilometer wide and keep an eye on it and develop strategies how to knock them out of their trajectory if they would come close to hitting us. And I learned that the Chinese government also got involved. So there is actually, there are really kind of huge thing happening there. This is not just something that we have to endure. There's governments really doing something about it. So I don't think I need to say much more about nature and man-made, some kind of existential threats. They are real. And since Shoemaker-Levy, it basically made it out what kind of crazy forces are behind these asteroids and comets when they hit us. So the title, the issue with the Anthropocene is that it's kind of a challenge term. And we saw this basically that this was rejected by where am I here? It was kind of in discussion. Should this be officially acknowledged by the geologist? And it was rejected. So what does this term actually mean when you look at it? It suggests that humans dominate the planet, which is governed by a mix of extraterrestrial and terrestrial physical, chemical, and biological interactions. However, it does not represent a new scientific field. A more fitting term could be Anthropocene, referring to this a new technoscience of humankind's control over natural systems, vital for survival both on Earth and beyond. And this became a question for me: is this all true or not? Because if is this assumption of our dominance over nature valid? Marx had coined this phrase, humanization of nature, naturalization of men, which applied to a rather benign some kind of situation. I mean, nature wasn't seen yet as having this agency of really putting us under. So it sounds to me like we're not in that place where we could say we control it. So then the question is, what kind of socio-economic initiative could establish global dominance and prevent or mitigate these emerging global disasters, whether caused by human activities or natural events? The distinction is clear. Human activities, we can stop what is negative. We have no control over these natural events yet. We're working on it, as we already mentioned, asteroids and comets. And then I looked at what kind of contemporary multidisciplinary approaches can be used to conduct investigation and support the necessary cultural and socioeconomic transformation needed to develop infrastructure, scripts, and services that ensure the ongoing survival of Homo sapiens. One thing is clear, just looking at what kind of punches supervolcanoes can deliver, are these large, what are they, igneous provinces. I mean, these huge eruptions. It's obvious we need some kind of abundance of storage of food, and maybe technology where we can generate food almost under really very adverse conditions. So it's basically these large scale things that are really have to be addressed. Yeah. So when I looked at it beyond earth science, environment, ecological series, deep ecology, Gaia, there were only basically two really academic social efforts in our time that systematically reflect on this totality of our involvements, planetary and cosmological. Big history of reform Marxism, I would say, technoscientific dialectic. It will become clear later what that entails a little bit. Since the deep ecologists are more concerned about anthropocentrism and advocate this ecological worldview, and Gaia, also these people look at self-regulating or co-regulating the homeostasis of the earth. They are relying basically on life. I think these two approaches, just as an example, don't appear important for us, how we should go about to manage this situation, because all nations, everybody wants to survive. and the will to survive should be on top of the agenda. It's obvious we don't want to live through what these dinosaurs had to experience. So now the Union of Geological Science announced that it is upholding the decision made earlier this month by a group of geoscientists not to recognize the Anthropocene. What does this really mean looking at this? I thought it's obviously that this is a political and socio-economic term, the Anthropocene, and that politics then turned out a very hard science. And it is interesting that the scientists involved in this, these different approaches, geopolitics, political realism, international relations, they're pushing more or less this stuff aside. I don't hear anything from that direction to basically get off their strange horses they're riding on and do something about it, because you can't continue with basically fighting against each other. We need to find a way to cooperate on planetary scale. Okay. So when we talk about science, what do we mean to convey with this? I need to backpedal here a little bit. I already had started talking a little bit about that Hegel was, to my surprise, early big historian. But he had, like all these people around that time, basically the fate of not knowing a whole bunch of the deep time of life on this earth. So his reflections are basically the last, we can now say 500 million years, like Darwin and others, when they reflected on life, it was multicellularity. And Hegel had basically two approaches in his natural philosophy. Yes, reconstructions. He talked about abiotic kind of causation, that means physical and chemical, and then transferred into life with this term teleological. He thought only animals are really kind of beings worth to consider because they have subjectivity and individuality. But we know now that this approach is kind of, it's just not no more tenable. And I need to go, ready to get out of here. Oof, slides. I wanted to go back.
Yeah, you could go slideshow a little bit to the right, right above,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then all the way to the left, or from current slide. The second one there.
From current slide. Okay, yeah, now.
Yeah, I think
I
you
have
just
to
have to.
jump to a
Okay.
slide down here. Okay. I want to bring up a causation because this is what, this is the heart, I guess, of Hegel's kind of dialectical laws. It's all about this cause effect stuff, the way he sees it. And I think just to introduce this kind of more wider concept that Ernst Mayr suggested, if you want to reconcile a materialist reconstruction of history, he said you need a classification that, for analytical purposes, differentiates between physical, chemical evolution, biological, and the revolutionary changes caused by hominins and Homo sapiens. So he turned the recurrent physical and chemical evolutionary processes poorly teleomatic. for example, the creation and destruction of solar systems, Earth's magnetic shield, and the ongoing generation of heat within the Earth that sustains all seismic activity. At the same time, he classified the living productions of microorganisms and multicellular life forms as teleonomic. The pre-intentional production and reproduction of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, multicellular plants and animals with metabolic byproducts that co-produce and reproduce newly emergent physical and chemical, biological, planetary conditions. And he believes that only humans are capable of comprehensive teleological behavior, planning to change the world through discoveries and inventions and large-scale, interconnected, technoscientifically regulated machines. Now, I need to just focus a moment on this idea, what became very important for me, how these bacteria, how they changed the planet, and that this classification or this approach, even by Darwin, is almost obsolete now, because if life forms change, for example, planetary spheres like the atmosphere and the hydrosphere, by oxygenating it, they become teleomatic active. That means you adapting to the environment. What does this even mean when it was the environment, the planetary environment was produced, this precondition was produced by life? So there is a complete glitch in this approach now for me, because you cannot just say they adapted to something what they produced, or they created the precondition for eukaryotic cells. So LECA, the last eukaryotic common ancestor, is basically only possible because these bacteria changed over the course of a billion years or more planetary conditions. So they're like the first biogeoengineers. And this doesn't fit anymore into the schemes of just the normal Darwinian approach of natural selections and adaptations to the changing environment. So I bring this only up because I stumbled over this, and I realized a new dialectic needs to come into play here. That means you need to have to expand this cause effect to activity cause effect. So that means the agency of these bacteria is incredible, and it needs to be clearly kind of laid down. Okay, so I'm stuck here somewhere in my paper. I need to get deeper into this. So let's see. So I want to go back. So this Hegelian approach, or then by Segway Marx, is not enough anymore. The dialectic research there needs to kind of get to the bottom of this new causation. And so, but Hegel contributed somehow to understand what we do scientifically. So I want to dwell on this now, maybe a little more for the rest of this presentation. Hegelian trying to understand why scientists can successfully identify objective, quantitative, and qualitative physical components using measurement standards, found that both philosophical terminology for explaining science and the language used by scientists to analyze the empirical world are forms of thinking. Every empirical science field has its own specialized language and measurement techniques that provide insight into specific aspects of our reality. these are enhanced by the expertise of professionals who explore various segments of the real world using categories established by scientists from different disciplines. The concept of categories is crucial in both philosophical, in philosophy and empirical science, but their focus is different. So when you look at it, philosophy has 10, Aristotle used 10 categories, Kant 12. They traditionally rely on a priori structure of human understanding. But to explain, for example, Galileo's first complex equation, v velocity equals length divided by time, how can one divide length by time? Some philosophical reasoning is necessary to explain the logic behind these accomplishments. Foundation of AI is based on 10 logical laws derived from the fact that as long as there's being and not being is inseparably intertwined.
Okay, it's been about 20 minutes. I'm not sure what Dave is shooting for, but it's been 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could get to conclusions, and then we can have a discussion. Thank you.
So if you look at it, this any standardized measurement judgment is quantitative and qualitative. Say velocity is 15 kilometers divided by hours. So you need an extensional and intensional logic to explain this, because it's these dimensions you're dealing with. It's like dividing apples by oranges. So for Hegel, then, science and philosophy are not separate. And he, in particular, found out over standards, and it was the kilogram, I guess, was the first standard that the French developed, that you use a subjective and an objective body to accomplish any of these measurements. And it is amazing that then the French that started this process created then over time this institute, and I thought it's funny, to establish world standards that the scientists in these different communities all agree upon. When you look at it, what I saw was the English held on to the standards until the 1960s, didn't want to have anything, their empire stuff. But then also Americans still don't like, in daily life, basically to subjugate themselves to this kind of universal standards. But it's obvious that everybody basically subjects themselves to this, because
we're going to have to wrap it up. We're going to have time for other people.
Okay, so I find this interesting just to bring up for the GOP, for example, this deregulation very often. Instead of following world standards we all work by now, they're basically always say, no, we're doing science differently. They're confusing basically everything. That's what I try to get at with this. At the end, I only put this on. Everybody can read this. This definition of the philosophy of science is also something that comes basically out of this tradition, and Marx contributed a lot to it. But it was actually this Peter Rubin that, for me, clarified what science is. Okay, I guess I'll leave you that question. Let's discuss.
Excellent, Karl. Thank you very much. Wonderful review. Do you have any comments or questions on there?
Well, in the comments, we were talking about Hegel and how to interpret the dialectics and all that. So we've been adding to Karl's presentation.
Yes, very good. Good chats. Ken?
Yeah. How can we use all this in big history as we move forward?
Well, I mean, when you yesterday the last presentation, I think, there's so many practical things involved. It's clear big historians, we're looking at stuff, for example, at the UN. What does the UN, for example, do with the segue into sustainability? I mean, there are practical discussions on high levels of industry, on government. It's not that, big history is basically, in a way, participating in this because you're talking about this. And it's clear this is not something that is outside, that is not outside of academic recognize. There's also, the UN also talks about these with the Sendai convention or paper. They talk also about what to do with natural disasters. I mean, they are not yet on this level, maybe going to these big things, but they surely see this as a huge task for all governments now to, first of all, how do you invest in your country's earthquake-proof buildings and so forth? How do you support other countries when they get in trouble? And we surely, we need a lot more of this because we see already all these refugees coming from environmental disasters. You see, say this last storm, what was it in Jamaica? It wiped out 40 or 50% of their whole economy. I mean, how do we deal with these things? Then there needs to be really kind of a buildup of international support systems, and I guess banks, the World Bank, they're doing quite a lot. It's not that this is not something that is not basically in the real world happening. So I know it's very difficult for us to kind of realize, we need to almost like work on programs that are vast, that are huge, and support this stuff. I mean, planetary defense system. I was flabbergasted that the US actually is really working on it. They have 3 ways of.
But the problem is cultural. The problem is that the politics and the economics make it impossible. How do we communicate this in a way that people can understand it?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like the whole system wants to create an enormous catastrophe so it can start all over again.
Yeah, there was I think this new thing about abundance. This also occurred to me looking at these early life forms. I mean, it's clear that from the beginning, the planet supplies, for example, at these geothermal vents, endless energy for billions of years, and the chemistry that flows out. So the life came into existence through abundance. And I read Nick Lane's book. He is one of those biochemists, and he makes it also very clear. This is the abundance is actually here, and this is another dialectic I found so strange, because when you look from the individual organism and the population, very often we always talk about lack. There's not enough energy. There's not enough food, and the scarcity thing is here all the time. It's in economics. It's in Darwinism, and yet over time there is this huge some kind of. It's not only complexity. You know what I mean? The complexity is only possible because there's an abundance of food, and energy is created. In particular, when you look at the food chains, these autotrophs are the ones that build up immense amounts of stuff. And the animals are basically in all these ecological communities or living off this, but also serving very often these plants. I mean, they're not undermining themselves and kill stuff nilly-vanilly. And plants know how to defend themselves. But the point is, the abundance is obviously there. And we discuss this in the wrong way if we don't bring that out, I think.
It's been 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think to move on here, I just wanted to say that I do think this is part of a topic discussed by others. Anthropocene is very much of a topic, and Emlyn Koster, who I know was in attendance in the past couple days. I think people come and go as they can in these conferences. I don't think he's here right now, but he's definitely one that really is involved in the Anthropocene kind of discussion. He had a webinar with David Christian a year or so ago. And so too bad he's not here for this. Matthew Slabach, which we heard yesterday, was wrote the book on the critic of progress, right? We're moving faster, but are we moving faster to what end? And so it's very kind of relevant in this discussion. And then someone who's not here, Mark Widdowson from England, has developed some models kind of for the creative destruction that sometimes we can't necessarily move forward, unless we have some, destruction of the path that we're on, so that we can discover a better path. So I definitely think that this is part of a larger discussion within big history. So thank you very much, Karl. Excellent.